Oh, we're recording. All right now. Morning. Morning. Happy Thursday. So again, my name is Frank. I am a transformational coach, as I would call it. And right now, my life is pretty busy. I'm coaching a bunch of kids to be better young men as well as better football players. I coach some adults in getting into better shape, and I help some people actually improve their lives and business as well online. So to some people, I'm a personal trainer. The context that I hold when I'm with my clients is that I'm supporting them in some kind of transformation. And the reason why I like taking that angle is because I believe that there's some things that are bound to happen if you show up. There's other things that will happen if you have the right mindset and the right intention. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. Really what I'm really inspired to be here for today is to talk about deflating the stigma. And first I want to thank Emily for getting me connected and getting me in the room. Paul and Phyllis, thank you for having me. Deflate the stigma. We're probably thinking, okay, like what does that mean? What is the stigma? What's the purpose? And the idea here is that my intention is to tell my story as quickly as I can. All right, I just want to make sure we got about 20 minutes. Tell my story so that other people understand that the big balloon that we're talking about isn't actually so big. I'm a living, breathing, walking, talking testament to what life can look like on the other side of what other people would consider a life sentence. And it takes, essentially the journey starts back when I committed my life to playing football. And I really committed my life to playing football. And I'm grateful for the commitment because what that created in my life was an incredible result. I'm one of few that was able to go from a small high school in the west end of Windsor, Ontario, where there was about 15 kids on our football team, to being a professional athlete, a man who slept on the floor on a futon in the living room in the West End, to a man who graduated university, to a man who eventually got drafted, to a man who is now a healed version of himself. And essentially, what happened in the long short is that in 2018, 2 years after I got drafted to the CFL, I had a catastrophic knee injury. The second one, actually, I tore my ACL, and I'm gung-ho on it. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back and play. And that wasn't the case. And the story that I told myself was that I was going to come back and play. 3 months later, I woke up one day and had this massive realization, this awakening of sorts. And the question I kept asking myself is, okay, so am I really going to do this again? Probably not. Okay, so if I'm not going to do this again, if I'm not really going to come back and play football, then who am I? What am I? What is my purpose? Why am I really alive right now? Which led to a deep rabbit hole of self-discovery and diving, which a couple weeks later ended up in me being admitted to the hospital in Winnipeg on my own, and I was diagnosed with bipolar. There's a deep story that goes in there that I won't talk about yet. But the whole point of this was that I went from the pinnacle of my life. I was a professional athlete. I'm living the childhood dream. And all of a sudden, I'm now in a hospital in a room, and I don't really know where I'm at. I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable. And the only story that I have of that space was my old roommate telling me that he used to beat some of the people up in the hospital. They were crazy. They were psycho. So I'm crazy. I'm psycho. My doctor just diagnosed me as bipolar and told me that I'd be spending the rest of my life on medication. That's my story. I'm no longer a football player. I'm a crazy guy. And all my friends back home, they don't really talk to me anymore. So that's my story. That's how I'm going to live. And so after this diagnosis, I ended up going back home. I didn't really have a lot going for me. I had minimal communication with friends at that point, not much money left to my name. I was able to essentially crawl myself into an apartment eventually and begin this process. And what this process really started with was me living the story that somebody else told me. Other people told me that I would suffer from depression and anxiety I would be under this label of bipolar for the rest of my life. And that was going to be the sum of it. And so I lived that story for about 6 months until I made a decision that I was done living that story. And I wasn't really sure what was going to come, but I knew that there was something inside of me guiding me far beyond what other people were telling me. And every time I followed that guidance, I ended up somewhere beautiful. And so I walked my path, and I decided to no longer take medication, and I decided to begin to do the work. I didn't know it was the work at the time, because at the time I was being told that I would be essentially going back to the hospital often and often and often. And what eventually happened during this process is that I became incredibly suicidal, and I really wanted to end my life. And in that process of wanting to end my life, for the first time in my entire life, I chose to reach out to somebody, and I chose to ask for support. And what that led to is another admission into the hospital, where I did end up getting put back on medication, and life became even more challenging. But again, there's a story of triumph in all of this, that deflating the stigma, that this is where it really comes from. Everything that was happening to me was stories that other people told me, and there was this guiding light inside of me that was leading me in a certain direction. And as I kept following it, I began to find out that there was some truth I was beginning to uncover that was my own truth that I had to stick with in order to continue moving forward. As my journey went along, I began to realize that a lot of my problems had less to do with what other people were telling me and more to do about the things that I had never really looked at. And the initial question, when I had thought about it 3 months after the injury, who am I, why am I here, what was actually coming up is that I didn't know who I was beyond a football player. And that's what the real problem was. I had spent so much time identifying as a football player that I didn't realize that I'm actually just a really hardworking young man. I'm kind, I'm loving, I'm compassionate, I'm understanding, I'm coachable, I'm willing to listen, I'm a very happy man, I love to learn. All of these qualities that I am, I didn't know. I could only identify myself and see myself as a football player, which created all these challenges. So eventually, I found myself in a space where I really needed to take myself on. And I didn't know this at the time, but there is a large community of people who spend a lot of time working on themselves. And that's where I began to dive into personal development and conscious reprogramming of my life, of my mind, of everything. And the way it kind of worked is that I went into many arenas, many areas, many personal development programs, and began to truly heal the wounds that I never looked at from the trauma and challenges that I experienced as a child. I cried a lot. I hated myself. I judged myself. I judged others. And again, to be clear, there's no true destination to the end of this process, but I did it. I really did it. And in this whole process, I realized that part of the reason why I went through what I went through was because part of my true purpose and why I am here and why I went through all of that was to be able to show people the strength of being given a label, of being given a story, and being able to overcome it. Because truthfully, had I chosen to live the story that the doctor told me, that I'd be suffering from depression, anxiety, being bipolar the rest of my life, at that point in my life, I was overweight. I didn't love myself, and I was living a life that truly had no purpose. And now walking this path that I walk now, one of a healed version of myself, one who loves himself, one who's really breaking generational challenges. I'm talking about, I'm a man now who is in a position to create financial stability that probably nobody in my lineage has had for generations. We're talking about a man who is looking at himself, forgiving himself for hurting other people when he didn't know any better. We're talking about a man who grew up as a teenager, who had no father figure, who essentially parented himself into being the version of a man he needed when he was younger. So the reason why I talk about deflating the stigma is because we put everything that goes on surrounding mental health into this box of depression, anxiety, bipolar, OCD, all these labels, when I truly believe in I am a testament to the idea and the possibility that we're talking about individual unique lives that face individual and unique challenges that require individual and unique solutions. And I am genuinely the testament to that because I don't take medication. I love myself deeply. I forgive myself often. I remember that I also go back to old beliefs and behaviors and ways of being. I forgive myself for that, and I keep coming back. I keep coming back. I keep coming back consciously to this new way of living that I want to create for myself. And I get to be the example. And I get to be the example for these young men. I get to be example for adults of what life can look like when you consciously choose to work on yourself, do the deep work. And I'm not talking about going to the gym and working out. I'm talking about the work that is looking at yourself in the mirror and realizing that you are the problem. Looking at yourself in the mirror, understand that everything that isn't working is not outside of your control, but inside of your control. Doing the work and understanding that it's okay, it's going to get better, and then also being really critically honest with myself and understanding that it is my fault, but I can also handle it. So when I simply talk about deflating the stigma, my hope is that I can go around and talk to some of these students in high schools and just people in general to show them how I live so that they can understand it's possible for them too. And also to show these young adults, these kids, people in general that might idolize me, that I'm very much human, that I very much still struggle, but I also choose to take it on. And I'm not going to be a victim of my life. I'm going to be a victor. I'm going to rise up. I'm going to be the man to change the course of the rest of my family, the rest of my legacy. And that's my choice. And I'm going to take it my way because it's my life. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak this morning. I hope again that you remember that if we can take a different outlook on people who we understand are struggling or suffering from mental health and understand that maybe it's not just to be confined into a box. Maybe if we remove the boundaries of a box and let it be open to their individual journey so that they can begin to define what's right and wrong for them, we can reduce the impact of what the mental health stigma really is. Again, there was a point in my life where I wanted to end it all, and it was because I was forgetting that I was more than just one thing. And now I'm a youth coach. I'm an adult coach. I get to be a life coach. I'm also a friend, a brother, maybe a father figure to some, and I'm many things, but I'm me, and I'm really grateful that I get to do that. So to be myself, and that's my day. That's my life. Yes.
So Frank, does the CFL have a program in place to help with individuals in your situation?
You know what? I really appreciate you bringing that up because I don't think they do. And this is something that I think my life will guide me in the direction of someday. I was kind of like thrown to the curb by my team. And this was at the point where like the stigma was a lot bigger than it is now. Now it's a bigger conversation. But at the point when it happened to me, I came out of the hospital. I went to talk to the coaches. They just kind of said, yeah, like, yeah, like figure it out kind of. So I go home and I found out I was released in a random article at the bottom, and it said Frank Renaud has been released by the team sometime right before the season. This isn't me blaming them or anything. I don't think they know. And to be honest, because it is a business and they don't really have much obligation other than paying what you do, there's not a lot of stuff in place for it. And so again, I really hope that I can tell the story to these young men, and I really do love coaching them because I can show them, although they probably don't listen right now, but maybe 10 years from now they'll click in. I just get to show them that there is life on the other side of that challenge where you have an identity crisis, because they will. But I get to give the example. Yes.
What tools do you use now to get that, or have you used in order to get to where you're going today?
You know, it's a process, and it transforms often. So some days it's journaling, Other days it is working out. I'm at a point now where it's been kind of in terms of tools. It's a lot of like the holistic work. It's deep breathing, it's getting into a routine, and a lot of it is it's living my life and being in observation of myself, reflecting. It's fine tuning. That if I could put into a tool, it's like if fine tuning was a tool, that's what I would call it. Yes.
Do you have any specific mentors or reading material or when you were doing sort of more the spiritual or the inner?
Yeah, the inner.
Was there anything specific that you felt drawn to that you were getting some enlightenment or some help from?
Yeah, there was really a lot.
Yeah, I know there's a lot.
There's so much, right? One of the, because I've done emotional intelligence training, and I've done men's work training, and then I've done youth coaching training, and there's kind of a little bit of a nugget in each of them. The foundation of it is my inner guide, if you will, because often the information I receive externally gets filtered by it first, because I have this kind of language that I speak inside that's kind of funny when it comes out into the world. One of the biggest keys is that I truly believe that my home, for some their home is 4 walls and a ceiling. For me, my home is in here. I don't have much to my name. I don't own a lot. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a fancy car, but I know that you can put me in whatever environment, and because I really feel safe inside of myself, I'm okay. And that's probably one of the coolest things, is that I've developed a home inside of me, and you can't take much from me that I really need, and that's part of that journey. Yes.
But I'm just wondering, in your, working with a whole myriad of people, have you come across somebody that is kind of going through that same process where they've been, newly diagnosed, that you've just happened upon, not necessarily looking for, and if there's any kind of advice? I have one of my patients, his son is going through kind of where you were, and it's he's at a loss of how to help his son through that. But have you come across people that are going through this kind of process just kind of by accident, or?
Yeah, I think that sometimes when we add the labels and the diagnosis, like I said, it puts people in a box. When clients come to me and they say they're being challenged with this and that, once I remove the labels and I just ask them, like, what's going on in your life, we realize that there's once we remove the labels, it's a life experience. And I'm grateful because I've had a ton of coaching in life coaching, asking the right questions, active listening. And I think one of the biggest things is that sometimes we project our fears onto others. So, for example, I don't know, but let's say this young man had some trauma from his childhood, and he can't process it. And he goes to X person who actually was part of the root of that trauma, and X person doesn't realize that. They might be projecting the same story over and over again. And this person is not necessarily stuck, but can't process what's going on in their head because they're continuing to receive. So my goal is I often don't actually give advice. That goes against what my coaching is. I ask questions because, again, I don't actually have your answer. You have your answer. My goal is to support you in finding your own answer. So
Sort of like self-discovery kind of thing.
yeah,
Like you have to figure out, but I understand what you mean by projecting, because if you're labeled as a such and such, then your behavior, you think what you think, and you are what you think, and you do what you think, and so that if you keep thinking that that's where I'm limited to, that just to kind of step away.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
you made me think of this. Okay, so when you we were all young, we were all 12 years old, and when you had that dream and that thing you wanted to do, that ambition, that thing that it didn't matter what anybody else said, like, I'm gonna do this. For me, when I was a little kid, I was 12 years old, my thing, I wanted to save the world. I wanted to save the world. And one of the hardest things for me was when my mom and my grandmother would say, Frank, you can't save the world. There's no way you can save the world. It's too big. You can't. And to be really honest, like, this is really sharing a real piece of my life. I am saving the world, because those little kids who are going to go do big things because they had me in their life, I'm saving the world. See what I mean? And one of the biggest things that I don't do is I do not stop them from being themselves. I actually invite it and I enjoy the experience because my job isn't to change anybody. My job is to support people. And I think that's what we need more of in the world, because if we were all the same, this world wouldn't be as beautiful as it is. So if we just allow this next generation and whoever else to just express themselves, it might seem weird to us, but to them it makes sense. Just like that dream of saving the world when I was a kid might sound weird to my grandmother or my mother, but to me it made sense. And as I continue to follow that guiding light, I'm here. So if everybody just followed their guiding light, we'd probably be in a much better situation. But I mean, that's neither here nor there.
Frank, you mentioned that you went against the advice of the medical community, specifically with prescriptions, then off and on, and you mentioned you're off now. Are your people, like medical people in your life, are they supportive now of your situation?
Great question. And are they supportive? So I no longer go back to my original medical doctor. And the reason why is because I had a specific meeting where I actually went into him and I was in a good place and I was just checking up on my knee. I wanted to get a scope on my knee. And he said, Frank, how's everything going? I said, pretty good. I mean, I'm working, I'm growing, I'm learning. Do I have good days? Yes. Do I have bad days? Yes. Life is good. And then I just want to get my knee checked out. He said, awesome. Would you like some medication as well for your bipolar disorder? And I said, excuse me, sir, have you not heard anything that I just said? It's working. And so at that point, I just I took it upon myself to realize that I needed to move in different directions. That's part one. Part two, and this is, again, I'm not going to tell anybody how to live their life. I see how cultures live in other parts of the world, and there's Buddhist cultures, and there's other cultures that believe that what my process was in an awakening of sorts and an inner transformation that was occurring. And from that space, I have a lot of people who support me there. In the medical space, it's not so much supported because there's more medication associated with it. So do they still support me, and am I still in touch with them? Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate you.
Frank, I have a question I've got. You talked about emotional trauma as a young person growing up. What effect has the physical trauma, being a linebacker, football, what effect has that had on your general health as well as your mental health?
So I don't remember much of my high school football career. That's
I can't remember mine either.
For example, one time I was running down the field. All I remember is running down the field, hearing a thud, and then opening my eyes, and my buddy was picking me up, and I jogged off, and that was it. But in terms of the injuries, so I've had 3 surgeries on my knees. Other than that, some sprained ankles, that kind of stuff. I'm a believer that I've done a lot of work to heal my physical body through my mind, and there are studies on it, Joe Dispenza, that kind of stuff. But now I'm actually in a really good place, and I really attest that to the evolution of my mindset and my process. I used to lift a lot of weight. We're talking hundreds of pounds. I deadlift over 500 pounds, and I put 285 pounds over my head in like a shoulder press. Like, I've lifted a lot of weight. And for some who lift that much weight, they carry that on for a long period of their life. For me, I'm not interested in that at all. Like, no, thank you. But I still lift weights. I still work out. I take care of my body, but it's shifted. And so a lot of those challenges in my knees and my ankles and stuff, they're actually gone because I've shifted to changing how I take care of my body. I believe that my body communicates to me in a way, if it hurts, then you should probably not do that, but take care of it. And so now I don't lift this heavy weight. My kind of thought is this: as I age, the weight's going to go down and the yoga is going to go up with it. So I've been doing yoga for a couple of years now. I'm a certified yoga teacher. I'm an example again for these young men that there's life after football, as well as something that can improve your football career. God, if I had yoga back when I played football, I would probably still be playing, but obviously God guided me in a different direction. He said yoga after football, which is fun. That's good. Yeah, but yeah, physically I feel great. I move well. I actually am way more athletic than I was when I played. Probably a little bit faster now because I'm not hurting so much. Jump higher, I move well. I do handstands and stuff. Like I just kind of like my body's more fluid because I'm not stiff.
And did you suffer concussions? Yes.
Maybe. Probably, yeah. If I don't remember things. Probably,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, yes. Again, thank you for having me. This was a great opportunity and great conversation, so.
Frank, it's my pleasure to thank you for your honest